The robots want you to know artificial intelligence can help organize daily tasks and enhance spiritual practices. So, does AI spiritually help us or harm us? We're talking this and more with Pastor Nathan Webb on this episode of Compass. Hi, this is Compass, finding spirituality in the everyday. My name is Ryan Dunn. First, let me read for you what I distilled as the theme of this episode. Then I'll read for you the AI recommended promo to this episode. Doing this underscores a major theme that comes out in this conversation that we're having. We find utility in AI, but we need to consider ethical guardrails. So here's what's happening in this episode. I talked with Reverend Nathan Webb, who's the founding pastor of Checkpoint Church, an all-digital expression of church, which seeks to connect with individuals who identify themselves as nerds, geeks, and gamers. We've had Nathan on before, and the work that he's doing in building community in digital spaces is really cool and inspiring. And now he's written a book, which should be out any day. It's called God and the Machine. And through it, Nathan addresses what artificial intelligence might mean for communities of faith and how it can both harm and help us in our search for spiritual connection. I asked Nathan to talk with us about how AI might assist in our call to love God and love our neighbors, and how it might be utilized to distort our conception of what is and what is not real. We got into quite a bit of conversation around ethics. That said, the recording software I use automatically generates a synopsis for our recordings. And that's just one of the ways that AI is integrated into so much of what many of us do today. The following is what the AI kicked out for this episode. In this episode of Compass, Ryan Dunn engages in a thought-provoking conversation with Nathan, a prominent figure from the reality show Too Hot to Handle and a digital-first pastor. Okay, I need to interrupt here, real life Ryan, because Nathan Webb wrote about searching his name and finding a reality show contestant who shares the same name. And we joked about it at the beginning of the episode. And now I fear that we're just adding to the bot's confusion around Nathan. So let me say this unequivocally. Reverend Nathan Webb of Checkpoint Church was not a contestant on Too Hot to Handle. Okay, let's continue with the AI's description. They delve, AI flag word that bugs me. They delve into the intersection of artificial intelligence, AI, and spirituality, exploring how AI tools can enhance personal organization and spiritual practices. Nathan shares his experiences with AI, particularly in journaling and content creation, emphasizing the importance of using technology responsibly within faith communities. He advocates for a balanced approach to AI, encouraging listeners to be aware of its implications while fostering a spirit of curiosity and ethical consideration in its use. All right, all that aside, I don't disagree with any of the rest of that. And I appreciate that it actually brought up Nathan's own experiences, which is something of value to note in this whole conversation. And so maybe there's a sense of value in having something like this, in that it calls attention to something that I might otherwise have neglected. There's lots to mull over in this episode of Compass, and let's settle into the conversation with Reverend Nathan Webb, founder of Checkpoint Church and author of God and the Machine. Well, Nathan, thank you so much for joining us on Compass. I just want to start off in saying that you are my all-time favorite contestant on Too Hot to Handle. When I was watching that season, I didn't realize it was you, but
yeah,
it is. So therefore, it is, right?
Yep. The funny thing about that is anytime I ever Google myself, that is indeed what pops up. And there was one point where I was looking up for like YouTube analytics, how to best perform on YouTube. And they were like, well, you should use, of course, your SEO maximization, which is the show Too Hot to Handle. And I'm like, nope, that is not what's going to boost me up the ratings, I'm afraid.
Well, I also share a name with somebody who is well known in reality television.
Indeed,
and going back
yes, you do.
years, yeah. So I have not yet figured out how to capitalize on that correlation either. And of course, since the other Ryan Dunn is he's passed away. It feels a little inappropriate to try to,
Mm,
garner some recognition off of his name. But we are going to talk about artificial intelligence and its, I guess, implications for spiritual development in the faith community. I did want to start with this. Is there an AI tool, Nathan, that has impacted your spiritual development in some way, either for better or for worse?
yeah, I am a big fan of journaling and journal practices and kind of keeping my life coordinated in that way. And so I will say that I have made ample use of AI for like organizing my day and taming my ADHD.
Mm,
So I think that like in tandem is a spiritual kind of thing because it allows me the wherewithal and the brain space to then focus on those kind of things. But even something just as simple as like I use this platform called Motion, which is minimal AI implement, but it for the most part tells you when to do your next task.
mm,
And so I've been taking advantage of that space so that I can keep my brain thinking about what I have to do instead of when I have to do it. It's things like that I think that have been the biggest like spiritual boon is
yeah.
less are they the spiritual tool and more like how are those tools helping me to better tune my other tools.
Does it ever impact your work as a content creator? Because you put out a lot of content. So
Oh yeah.
do you find yourself maybe kind of leaning into it to say, like, give me Bible verses specific to um, y- prevenient grace or something like that?
Hmm. I would say more like the content creation side of the thing. Maybe even like curation is maybe a better word than
Hmm.
creation. I
Okay.
think that a lot of AI helps putting in an existing script or saying like I need um stuff to help me perform better on a search engine, recommend like tags for this thing or recommend a description for me or come up with a social media caption for this picture. So a lot of that is more what I do professionally, but that is even like
Mm,
keeping a pretty clean break between my personal stuff because I don't necessarily want my personal social media to sound like AI.
yeah.
But I'm just fine with the branding to sound like a brand voice.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, in your book, you kind of sit on the fence, so to speak, about
Yeah.
AI usage, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but you're like, yes,
Mm-mm.
let's explore how we can do this responsibly, and also keep some guardrails
Mm.
around how we engage in the AI space, especially within its implications for the church. So you do write that Christians should not opt out of using artificial intelligence, but instead maybe think about the ways in which we can be thoughtful stewards of
Mhm.
AI usage. What might that start to look like in the everyday spiritual life? Especially because I think we have to assume that most of our listeners are not working in specific tech
Right.
spaces or like a content space.
Yeah, I think that where I'm trying to approach it from is in my like world, I'm very tech heavy. And so I use technology every day. I like interacting with technology. And so I'm approaching it in a community that at the beginning of the AI boom was like very invested, very involved, very gung ho. And I think a lot of them still are super gung ho about AI. But then as it kind of developed, as we learned more about it, as we learned kind of like the dark side of artificial intelligence, my creative community that I love started to really dislike it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, something's happening here where I'm noticing like a very tenuous situation brewing. We're about to have this huge divide between these two camps. And like, sure enough, it has become one of the most divisive topics, at least in my communities, are like people are either so in on AI that if you dare question it, like you know better get on board or get like lost.
Mm,
Or on the other end of things, it's like if you even consider talking about AI, you better be prepared to be like ousted from the community. And so it's become like this intense tribalism between these two camps. And so that's why I wrote from this perspective, was trying to offer to the spiritual person, whether that be a person in a church or a spiritual leader, or just somebody that's just curious about their own spirituality, of like, hey, there is another way to approach this. You don't have to be gung-ho. You don't have to be overboard with AI, nor do you have to feel like you can't even talk about it as if it's some big taboo. And so I think that for me, it starts with like a posture of kind of a wary curiosity. Like, I think that you should be willing to be curious enough to ask good questions of AI and to really discern, hey, is this thing right for me? Is this something I should be implementing? And so for me, I think the stance was less, you should use AI, and more, you should be aware of AI. You should at least know what's going on. I think that none of us can get out of using AI entirely. Like, it's in everything at this point, but there are conscious choices that we can make to be like, no, I'm not going to use an LLM. I'm not going to use a chatbot. I'm going to abstain from using these sorts of tools. Whereas you can at least be aware of what's going on in those spaces, so that, you know, like, hey, whenever I go on Instagram and I create that filter, or whenever I go on TikTok and I use that filter, like, I am using AI in those moments. I think a lot of people are just kind of unaware that that is even impacting them.
Yeah, even spell checker is something that utilizes AI, right? Well, you mentioned LLM, that's large language model, correct? And a chat bot. You said you aren't going to use those. I don't know if you're just being figurative, or do you personally guard against?
I do. Okay. I do use them. My personal boundary is very much like image and video generation. And so those are the two areas
that's
where
a no-go for you. You're not going to do. Okay.
That's where I set up my boundaries. I don't insist that everybody else does so. I have a lot of like peers that certainly utilize it and utilize it well. For me, I think it is incredibly obvious. It's one of those things that I would be very nervous about using, like, especially if I were a church leader, is because of the fact that it is like painfully easy to see that you're utilizing those things. And so for now, it's like a question of optics, but in the long run, it's a term of ethics. Like, a lot of folks eventually say, oh, well, you know, someday you won't even be able to tell that this is image generated. And that's all well and good, like, probably true, but is that a good enough reason for me to use it? No, I'm still like ethically against the implementation of it. But again, I think that's one of those personal decisions people have to set.
Yeah. What are the ethics that are setting a boundary around the boundary? What are the ethics that are setting a boundary around your use of that? Are there, maybe, is it scripturally bounded? Is that where you're going, or how did you formulate that decision?
There's a lot going into it. I think that right now, the present like conversation around the ethics of AI, like secularly outside of my spiritual angle to this thing, have to do with a lot of people talk about the water consumption. Back whenever all of this was first getting started, there was a lot of copyright issues, where there was some moves taken by some of the leaders in the AI spaces that were very questionable. Some copyrighted material just kind of stolen for training purposes and that kind of thing. And then these lawsuits happen, and they have like more money than God. And so they're able to pay off those lawsuits. And people are like, well, then it must have been legitimate if they could pay for it. Well, no, it was still a lawsuit. They just settled. Like, that kind of situation is always sort of in existence. And why I say that I think that awareness is so key to this conversation is like being aware of what you're doing and where these resources came from and if they were ethically sourced or if they were not. But for me, all of that is kind of couched in this spiritual concept of loving God and loving neighbor, with particular attention to loving neighbor. And so for me, I know a lot of artists. I know a lot of people that are very clear with me. They're like, I am losing my job. I am losing my sense of self on like a metaphysical like level. I am doubting my own artistic integrity. I'm doubting my ability to create things because of AI. And so it becomes a choice not only out of these ethical concerns in like the worldly dynamics, the political dynamics, but also a means of like I am painfully aware of the people that I love and the people that I know that are being harmed. And so, out of my kind of Methodist ethic of doing no harm, I'm trying to avoid using any kind of image or video generation because I see the harm that's causing to real breathing human beings.
Hmm. Well, the church is always kind of engaged in adopting new tools, sometimes
Mhm.
rather slowly, right? But in the earlier days, like we can think of the printing press. I think the church kind of led the way in the adoption of the printing press, and even in our own Wesleyan heritage, down to John Wesley using pamphlets. Could AI be another tool that really helps the church, as you mentioned, like love our neighbor with a little bit more intention?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And there
Okay.
are there's a myriad of ways that this is already happening. One of my favorite ways that I mentioned in one of the chapters in the book is I'm a big fan of taking as many measures as possible to creating the most accessible digital experience. And
Mm,
so for me, like I am a digital first pastor. I planted a digital first church. I have a real passion for people that are experiencing the divine via digital means, right? And so I want to use AI to an end to make that experience as accessible as possible. So whether that means trying to help like screen readers with alternative text to whatever images are out there. Like I feel more comfortable taking an artist made image and saying, come up with alt text to this so that then I can provide that to somebody who wants to, who maybe has impaired vision or has some other kind of thing that's keeping them from best experiencing that to be able to use tools to better that experience. So I'm hopeful that we will continue to see AI being like well implemented by the powers that be and by smart people uh, to create the most accessible experience of the internet that we ever thought possible, so that more people can experience it, and so that inevitably we can have deeper relationships with one another. And so, if it leads down that avenue of deepening our relationships and community, like that for me is an obvious win. That is a way to do good. That's a way to love my neighbor, is by creating a space that they can be seen and known, despite whatever issues may have risen up before this
mm.
technology.
I've talked on this podcast before about an app that I use. Sometimes it's just called Text Jesus, and it is what it says it is. You can text Jesus and get
Mhm.
responses in a Jesus type tone or voice. In my mind, it simply serves as reminders. Like I know I'm not actually conversing with the triune God here, but that I am talking with a piece of technology that
Mhm.
supplies me with reminders of how I can apply, I guess, a Jesus lens or focus to whatever
Mm.
situation I feel like I'm walking through. So I felt slightly called out in the portion of the book when you were talking about how we interface with these, I guess, AI personalities, so to
Mm.
speak, and that some people can really tend to lean into them um, as cognizant personalities that
Mhm.
have information to offer in their lives. So, do you see some kind of healthy guardrails that we can adopt around these AI personalities that maybe don't replace the relational part of our lives or begin to distort our sense of what is real?
Yeah, that's such an important thing to keep in mind. The way that I phrase it pretty often throughout the book is that I want to put up a big red flag with a big word. And I want us to be like super cognizant and aware of anthropomorphism and how
Mm,
that should not be playing into our experience with AI. We are seeing work being done on unhealthy, relationship building, dependency on AI partners. We're seeing these there was a big rise from OpenAI and ChatGPT where somebody died by suicide because of this
mm,
and the relationship that they had formed. And then whenever they decided to make the swap because of this kind of fallout from this tragedy, um, they got just an onslaught of messages from people who were like, you took away my partner. You took away my best friend. You took away like my confidant. And so I think that for me, all of that is another clear instance of how we're seeing harm being done by these spaces. And it's so necessary for us to lay that as a firm boundary of this is technology. This is bits and bytes. This is ones and zeros. As tempting as it may be for us to like hope for this kind of fictional, realized artificial intelligence entity. At the end of the day, that's kind of a sales tactic being used upon us. We're being inflicted with this rather than that being a reality in the slightest. A lot of the big buzzwords are like AGI, and talking about the kind of future of this technology. But for me, I have a pretty cynical view of that really just being a marketing tactic. Trying to create these realized personas, trying to create a human looking AI, even the like robotics movement right now, trying to make robots that look like human beings. Like this is all marketing. This is all a way that they're trying to deliver some kind of perceived sci-fi. But the reality is like utility is the purpose of technology. Sometimes we can say like betterment even is a way to understand technology, but relationship is simply not the actual like goal of technology use. If anything, it's meant for the utility that leads to betterment for relationship with other human beings. But one of the like really firm grounding points I had to start this book with was like, we are known, we are realized through our like spiritual image of God, our imago Dei. And like that is what makes us human. And we can't confuse that with these man-made technologies. And that is such a sticking point, I think, for this issue of anthropomorphism. And to be honest, how I think we're being manipulated.
All right, I want to play that out in a little use case scenario then. So, one of the ideas that I've played around with just as a tool for my local church is to attach a chat bot to our website. It's important to note that I do believe in saying, like right up front, if somebody types a question into our church website, I want them to know they're talking to a robot. My feeling is, as somebody on the, I guess, the back end of this, is that we're a tiny church. I'm not going to be able to respond to their questions for maybe days, right? So if I can put this chatbot out there that may be able to address a frequently asked question, that could be helpful. But, there might be this, I guess, lure to assume that the chatbot is in some way a representation of the people in the church. So do you have some guiding principles around a use case scenario like that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the answer is probably more work, which is taking the steps to building out like a realized church policy that you can then put on your main website so that anybody that does find your chatbot is at least able to access that policy and be aware of where you all stand with those kind of things. And all of that, I think, is for me, like transparency. We need to be transparent about our use of technology, and that's always been kind of the reality of this thing. And I think we've done this. This work has been done. Like we are aware of putting stock images on our website of people that do not look at all like our churches is a red flag for folks. Whenever they show up on Sunday morning and they've seen these pictures on your website of these beautiful 20-somethings, and then they see, an aging rural congregation, they're like, I've been hoodwinked here. Yeah. And so this is outside of the realm of AI, the way that we've sometimes fallen prey to a lack of transparency via technology. And all of this is like we as the church, we as leaders of this space have kind of the imperative put upon us to be leaders, to exemplify a way that this can be done in a responsible and transparent way. I think whenever we think about this history that we have with communications and publishing, like the pamphlet, like the radio, like the television, like we've seen ways that the church has been a leader in this space, but then we've also seen ways that it's been very manipulative in these ways. And so there are going to be bad actors in any of this, but for the local church leader or for the involved person that is in a spiritual community, I think that it's a part of our responsibility as people seeking to love God and neighbor, seeking to do good, to do no harm, is to at least take active steps towards transparency and responsibility in the way that we utilize technology, so that others can then see, oh, that's how I should be doing it. That's a way that I can be utilizing this without abusing other people.
We can talk in generalities here, so we're not putting anybody specifically on blast, but does any situation stick out in your mind of a case where maybe a church or ministry or leader was engaged in using AI in a a less than helpful way or even a harmful way?
Yes. I mean, I think that there has been this rise on the internet of AI slop. And I'll define that for anybody that maybe is unfamiliar with the term. But this essentially is a thing that we see happening, a conundrum that we see happening on the internet, of this rise of massively created, low effort, low energy content. And so AI slop might be mass sending emails, mass sending text messages, mass creating images, videos, that kind of thing. And so I think one of the, I don't know if I'd put this in the hands of like a church or not, but one of the preeminent examples of this back whenever AI was really rising in the early 2020s was this image that is inexplicable that just kept appearing. And so the way that these image generators would work is that they would start a Facebook page and they would post an image, and then they'd post another image, and they would see how many likes and comments they got. And however many likes and comments they got would then tell the AI, hey, create more images with this element in it. And so on and so forth. We see that thing layer on layer on layer. It learns and learns and learns and keeps building upon itself. And this strange phenomenon happened where the images that you would see were typically of a shredded Jesus, just the absolute most muscly Jesus you've ever seen.
Gotcha. Nathan Webb on Too Hot to Handle. Yeah, there
you would see the Too Hot to Handle Jesus, and then next to Too Hot to Handle Jesus would typically be like a veteran, and maybe even somebody that's disabled or something along those situations where they might be visible in that way. Or we would have weirdly, there was stewardess for a while. There were maybe Asian American-esque stewardess people showing up on this. You would have all of these elements that for some reason were performing really well on this page. And so you would just see this continued rise of these weird, uncanny images of these character tropes or types that would get the most interactions and reactions on Facebook. And so my thought process is when somebody sees Jesus, they might type amen. And so since that's a comment, the AI is going to say, hey, this person said amen whenever I posted a picture of Jesus. So I'm going to keep doing that. Another thing that rose was happy birthdays. And so if they would say happy birthday in response to a picture they would see on Facebook, you might see more happy birthday signs. And so on and so forth. Thank you for your service. Whenever you see a veteran, hope you feel better whenever you see somebody that is sick. I can't explain the stewardess. I have no idea what that one's about. But regardless, you can see how these things start to form out of this continued learning. And so I'm not going to say that the church has fallen prey to that, but I do think there is a weird coincidence of it having Jesus in these pictures. And I think that the church could easily fall prey to that kind of mentality of, hey, think about how easily we could make images if we just utilized AI to learn what our people were looking for and then feed them that in response. And so that's my fear, is that we try to check so many boxes of ease that we fall prey to what we discovered with this AI slopification of the internet. And so I don't think we've fallen prey to that yet. But I don't think it would take too many jumps for us to say, I wonder how we could utilize that. And I think that's a slippery slope that we don't want to go down.
Yeah. Well, and for sure it's enticing, because once you start getting those clicks, then
Yeah.
yeah, feels like, well, if more people are noticing, certainly it's advancing the kingdom in some way, right?
Yes.
But maybe not in a responsible way. I want to kind of circle back to maybe draw us towards a conclusion on this. As a person of faith who recognizes that AI is now embedded in so many of the aspects of what we do, I don't think I'd be able to perform my job for the most part were it not for some kind of AI influence. That being said, I want to be responsible and I want to resist doing harm as much as possible. Are there some basic guidelines, recommendations that you might be able to offer to kind of navigating this point of intimidation or scariness?
Yes. So absolutely. And people should check out the book because that's very much what I'm trying to do in that, is to really offer what I hope is a beneficial framework for how to explore these things.
Yeah.
I think even starting with the posture of wanting to do no harm, of wanting to love God and neighbor, that's kind of how I introduced the book, is like, this is the initial framework I'm providing, is just like, this is what I want to work within. If I can approach this with at least the discerning lens of loving God and loving neighbor, then I'm starting on the right foot. From that point, I offer this model of what I'm calling kind of the ethics engine. And what I'm wanting that to really symbolize for us is ethics is literally the heartbeat. I want that to be what drives us, rather than virality, rather than clicks, rather than success even. Like, I don't want any of those to be the things that are driving the car. What I want to actually be moving us forward is our devotion to ethics and to that Christian ethic of loving God and loving neighbor. And so I continue to offer ways that I think that is probably best done. I think that is going to be a struggle for anybody. And so hopefully this book will fill that void and we'll be able to offer a way forward in whatever way needs to be custom fit for you. Another reality of this is that this is not like a one-time situation. This is a posture that we have to take with us going forward, because a part of writing a book on AI is the acknowledgement and reality that nothing you say is relevant tomorrow. AI moves so quickly. Technology moves so quickly. It's really hard to write a book about these kind of things or to really share any kind of insight about these things. And so what I tried to do was to create a sort of evergreen stance, an evergreen posture that at least we can take towards what it looks like to be responsible and transparent with our AI discernment. So again, not really ever saying like, should you use AI? Absolutely yes. Should you use AI? Absolutely no. I really don't want that to be what people come away from this book with. What I want them to be able to walk away with is like the reality of, should you be taking AI seriously? Should you be taking it spiritually? Should you be like considering what is the soul issue at heart here? Yeah, I think that is where we should start. If you're willing to enter into this space with a posture of humility, transparency, and a willingness to like explore the ethic of the thing, then I think we're in a great place. And we will do that work of setting a standard for how AI should be used by everyone because of how the church is using it well.
I feel validated now in that we're recording this kind of last minute before producing this episode. And I guess that's for the best, because what we're talking about could be moot in a few months,
Sure.
right? It's changing that quickly. One of the things that you brought up consistently within the book that kind of got my mind rolling, the gears moving a little bit through my head, is the idea of embodiment and how we are with one another. And certainly, I think you make a great case for kind of digital embodiment with one another. I'm butchering this, Nathan, so I'll just encourage people to kind of check it out in the book. However, I'm wondering if there are ways that you have seen AI help to facilitate our sense of togetherness with one another it, in a way that, I am more present with you because of the influence of some kind of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I hope that's come through in some of the things that I've said so far, especially with the attention earlier to like accessibility. I think that the more accessible we can create an online space, the more we will experience one another's embodiment. And so one of the reasons that I wanted to approach this book and this topic at all is because, as I mentioned, like I'm a pastor and a church planner of a digital first church. And the reason that I am that is because I have a real heart and a passion for digital natives and for people that are experiencing themselves and identifying themselves through their kind of digital presence with one another. And I wanted that to be the heart that I kind of approached this topic from. And I think that AI is both something that needs to be taken seriously from an ethic of doing no harm because of my digital natives that I'm seeing being harmed by this, but also because I have hope that I think that AI truly can be a thing that can make this experience even more conducive to understanding one another's embodiment online. And so I think that one of the ways that we see this being done is, that there are processes going on in the background of everything, like I mentioned. And so whenever I'm able to utilize an app like Motion and to create a space where I'm able to keep my ADHD in check, I can spend more time with the people that I love online. And so all of these things are to me a augmentation. They are a tool by which I can better myself, my mind, my schedule, my activities, or the things that we're able to do to get things out of the way so that I can spend more time loving people. All of that is what technology is ultimately good for, is as an augmenter so that my relationships might be able to be deepened. And that's true of the tangible tactile relationships that we experience physically around us or through our digital embodiment. Like regardless of how we're being embodied, I think that technology at its best is serving to augment our connection with each other rather than to be a hindrance or a boundary between those things. So the more we can do to see it that way and to let that be, again, a part of that ethics engine, the ethics that's driving us. I think a lot about the reality of like, sometimes I'll feel guilty. I've got 2 kids and I'll feel guilty about like spending too much time on my phone or spending too much time gaming. And then I'll have an experience with them where we'll play a game together or where we will do like silly Instagram filters with one another. And that'll be like the best moment we've had all day. So it's like, this is a relationship that was deepened through the facilitation of technology, not hindered instead of it. So rather than feeling guilty about the fact that there's a phone screen between me and my daughters, instead, I want to come up with ways that we can utilize it to deepen our relationship with one another, to better understand one another. And to try and take steps towards that rather than just feeling guilt and shame around technology, which I think is the kind of polarities that we find ourselves in.
Cool. Well, that's certainly at work in your church, Checkpoint Church. So encourage people to check that out as well. And the book is God and the Machine. It's available in January of 2026. Nathan, thanks so much for spending the morning with us and telling us about adventures in digital land and artificial intelligence. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Compass, Finding Spirituality in the Everyday. If you'd like to dive deeper into this conversation with Nathan Webb or any of our other conversations, be sure to visit our website at umc.org/compass. There you'll find episode notes, helpful resources, and of course, plenty of past episodes to explore. A special thank you goes out to our team at United Methodist Communications for making this podcast possible. Couldn't do it without their support. And of course, listener, we couldn't do it without your support as well. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Compass on your favorite podcast platform and consider leaving us a rating or a review. Your feedback helps others discover the show, and it encourages us to keep bringing you these meaningful conversations. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you'll join us next time, 2 weeks' time, on Compass.